Hello and welcome to this video in which we will be spending most of our time in the tone mappers in Darktable. Those are Filmic RGB and Sigmoid. Take this as part 5 of the series if you like, but it can be watched independently. The whole point is to talk about colours, why on some photos the colours just do not look right. It's called the Bezold-Brucke effect. We'll go into some detail on several images. Okay, I'm Nicholas and let's do this together. Okay, I'd like to start with a small disclaimer. I am actually running Darktable 4.9, which is one of the pre-release versions of 5, because there's a bug with the GFX 100S files. I hope that'll be fixed shortly. But we have, in essence, it is Darktable 5. Let's start with a fun fact now. Sunsets. So everyone knows that sunsets are orange. We all know that, don't we? Obvious. Now, I have just a photo here with, there's actually not much done to it. I'm going to, so Filmic and Sigmoid are off, so there's no tone mapping. Let's map the tones with Filmic. And what do we notice? That it is not orange, it's kind of reddish. Okay, well, let's try a sunrise. On this example, you'll see a little bit better because I have the sun quite full here. So same thing, I don't have much running on the photo, just the basic stuff without the tone mappers. But when I switch on Filmic, it's actually red. Now, what does that mean? Normally, Filmic and Sigmoid, we could try with Sigmoid, by the way, same thing. Filmic and Sigmoid will preserve the colors in the highlights. The idea of Filmic and Sigmoid is that not only are they mapping the tones, but when I increase exposure, the idea is that the colors will stay true to what they were, and they won't shift. They won't shift towards yellow, orange, red, whatever. They'll stay kind of true and move gradually to white, which is not what happens in real life. In real life, this sun here, I'll switch it off because it's wrong. As I was saying, it's wrong. This sun here is not white. It's orange. Look at the sunset. It is orange. There's no white. In digital photography, we don't have until maybe in the future where we'll have these ultra HDR monitors that can actually blind us like the sun can. For the moment, we don't have that. So the idea, which is what happens kind of on a film emulation, is it will gradually blow out to white with smooth transitions of tones and not some kind of strange, odd haloing. Yes, you can kind of, a bit here we have orange and then we have this strange yellow and then white. That can happen. So switch on Filmic, everything goes red, and we've had it. This is the Bezold-Brucke shift, the Bezold-Brucke effect, and we have it here. So the Bezold-Brucke shift is a change in hue perception. It's not the actual object that's changing hue, it's our perception of it that changes as light intensity changes. So spectral colours will shift more towards blue in the lower wavelengths and towards yellow in the higher wavelengths. That is the sun. At lower intensities, the red-green axis dominates. That means that red becomes more yellow with increasing brightness. Right. So light may change in the perceived hue as brightness changes, despite the fact that it retains a constant spectral composition, which means that this sun, as it's rising, let's cut that out, the actual spectral hue of the sun is not changing, but as the intensity increases, then I will see it more and more yellow. And if we go back to the first one here, the effect is lesser because the sun being closer to the horizon, our eyes accept that at one point it will become red. It hasn't changed. It's just that as the intensity goes down when the sun reaches the horizon, then the sun turns red. We think it's normal. We've seen it loads of times. And we think the sun's changed colour. It hasn't. It's just that when it was higher, it appeared to us yellow. It was actually the same red. So that means that Filmic and Sigmoid, the tone mappers, are getting the colours right. There's no problem, except for that's not what I see. So we need to do something to change how Filmic and Sigmoid. It's kind of what The idea is to have a color space which will represent the colors properly, like in Filmic and Sigmoid. That's what they do. But we need some kind of additional equations on top of that to be able to make room for our psychological, physiological perception of light. So let's see how we can get our nice colours back in the sunrises and sunsets with Filmic or Sigmoid switched on. Now, I'm not going to hide the fact that in Filmic it is much more difficult than in Sigmoid, because in Filmic, let's just set that to the original, well, kind of measure auto-tune the levels. We don't have anywhere where we can actually, not visibly anyway, change the conservation of colours. There used to be, don't forget this is version 7 of Filmic. We have all the previous versions. And in version 5, there was an option to not preserve chrominance. There we are. So we got some yellows back there. That is one way of doing it, going back in time to version 5. In version 6, we get the same preserve chrominance, no, but for some strange reason, it doesn't. We can actually get this back in version 7, so we don't need version 6. In version 7, now we do have a slider. I don't know if you've seen this. It's highlight saturation mix. When you look at the documentation here for the look, let's go down, display, highlight, preserve chrominance. There we are. Not available with Color Science version 7. You need to go all the way down to the background, and it's here. So the approach in V7 is to offer a mix between the max RGB norm. The idea of a norm is to preserve the ratios between the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, which means that you actually divide them all by a norm. This is maths anyway. And when you make modifications, then you can get the ratios back by multiplying by the same norm at the end of the modifications. Bit complicated, forget about it. Norms are all different. You can see the different norms in versions here in V5. You can see the different norms that are available to us. You see max RGB luminance, RGB power norm. Those are mathematical ways of calculating distances in 3D space. No need to know that. But what we do need to know is that we have the highlight saturation mix. So if we go to minus 50%, it is strictly equivalent to the V6 no preservation option, and not the V5. Plus 50, it goes to max RGB norm. So we're actually going from one norm to another. 0 is an average of no preservation and max RGB, so we don't get any no preservation whatsoever. And otherwise, the other values are kind of a mix between the two norms. And so we should be able to get something back. But the problem is, so let's go to V7. And if I go into this and go down to minus 50, then I am changing the colors. But this is the same as V6. And however I do it, even if I move back, if I go less than 50, and I move right back, or go forward, you see, it's actually staying this orange color. And I cannot get it back to my nice yellow sunshine with my tone mapping done, which I desperately need in a high dynamic range image. So the only option is to go V5 and nothing. And then you can mix the tones. You can get more colors back. Don't forget increasing latitude. The latitude, if you don't know about that, is kind of 2 points here. We have a place in the center around the medium gray, in which the saturation is at 100%, and then there's a decrease in saturation as you go toward the blacks and the whites, which gives it that filmic look, kind of the ethereal fade to white in the highlights. So we can get kind of something not so bad out of Filmic going back to V5. Now, if we leave Filmic for a moment and go to Sigmoid, So with Sigmoid, what can I do? Add a little bit of contrast. So the skew will give me kind of more or less details in the highlights. I think I'll leave that in the middle. We have here a slider which is preserve hue. And the idea here is that I can remove the part of the module which does hue preservation and move it to 0. And by not preserving the hue, I'm actually sliding the colours towards the yellow, which I'd expect. So that will mitigate the problem. And we're kind of imagining that we are kind of solving the Bezold-Brucke shift problem. You can also change. The advantage of Sigmoid is we have quite a few sliders to adjust colours. So we can actually, with the rotation of the red. Now, don't forget that these primaries here is not the same as the primaries module. This will only have effect in the highlights, which is exactly what we want to change here. So that is brilliant for us. So we can kind of put in a very solid yellow. We can make it even more yellow by reducing the blues, but I think we can go too far. You can put a bit of attenuation there to desaturate slightly, and we have quite a nice sunrise there. And the same thing will go for the other photos. So that's a sunrise. So that was taken at 5:52. Oh, 5:52 in the morning. I can't remember doing that. And here we have one taken in the evening, so that is 9:30 in the evening on the beach. Let's go to Sigmoid and we will reduce the preserve hue, and we can, we really need to add a little bit more colour to that. What that would do with colour balance RGB, which is off actually, it's got some vibrant colours. And we have something that's kind of not too bad out of the bat as the colours go. So if I put preserve hue on, look at the sun here. If we zoom into the sun, there the sun is distinctly red and it's turning kind of yellow and the sky around it yellow, which is what we expect from the photo, even if it is not reality. So Sigmoid seems to be more adapted for this kind of landscape work. That is honestly I understand why landscape photographers will go towards Sigmoid. I do a lot of black and white to do portraits, and really I love Filmic for that. But we have the two, and that's brilliant. Let's see another case then where things become a little bit more subtle. Now, another case where you'll meet the Bezold-Brucke shift is some intense light coming from candles or any kind of fire. We can actually also see it here in the reflection of these silver elephants. They are little shapes on a candle. We also have it here in the highlights there. So the idea here, I'm going to remove Filmic. So you see the tones become yellow and more pleasant already. And I'm going to use Sigmoid. Now, the thing is, when Sigmoid is on, I can choose, if I remove the preserve hue, and I get some nice colour back in the cake and the candles. I do not care really for the colours here on the face. I actually prefer them as they are kind of round here, or maybe somewhere in between the two. And the idea now is to kind of process this image in two instances of Sigmoid. So I'm going to have one which I will call the candles, which will be the highlights, and I'm going to have another for the rest. So I'll make a parametric mask. Let's go to the JZ, which is the lightness. And I think I'll switch on M, the masks, and we can go quite high. Use the boost factor to give ourselves more headspace in the highlights. I've lost the mask. How far can we go down? Oh, keep on losing the mask. I want to remove everything that's in the face. So kind of something like that. Add a bit of feathering. The mask has gone again. There we are. We have kind of a decent mask. And in this part, I'm going to reduce the preserve hue. So we're going to go from reds to yellows. Keep an eye out in the highlights there. and we'll move it down, and we get now kind of a pleasant colour back for the candles. The rest of the photo for the moment is not processed, and I would like to have some kind of tone mapping done, if only to give me some security if I need to carry on editing the photo afterwards. So I'm going to make a duplicate of that. I'm going to go down to raster mask here and use the same one as candles, but invert it. And the advantage of this is if I change the mask on the previous instance of Sigmoid, then automatically this one will update. They are linked. And for this one, you see I have color processing, preserve hue, and now I can look kind of in the face whether I want to change that or not. I could maybe leave it something like this. Gives you the idea anyway of what we can do with two instances of Sigmoid. You could actually have one of Filmic, one of Sigmoid if you like. See what kind of change that makes. It's quite fun actually. It's very quick to do. We'll just add a basic curve there for the oh, no mask used. Oh, it's below. Okay, move Filmic up. Sorry about that. You can only use the raster mask of a module that's underneath. And I can use Sigmoid candles and invert that. And there we have a mixture of Filmic and Sigmoid. So Sigmoid to remove the problem with the Bezold-Brucke effect, and Filmic for the rest. There we have it, problem solved. Have fun with that. Now let's see two other cases where you might want to think about Bezold-Brucke. Now I found an article online in sciencedirect.com, that's the website, about the Bezold-Brucke Hue Shift. And I found in the introduction, it was something that caught my attention, talking about the old masters, the painters, Michelangelo, Rubens, show correct or slightly exaggerated Bezold-Brucke Hue Shift, which means that they had already observed that yellow-green hues, lawns, clothes, are greener in the shade, yellow in highlight, and yellow-red hues, which are skin tones, are redder in the shade, yellow in the highlight. And I thought that it would be a good way for us as photographers to give the impression that there is some bright sunlight rather than being in the shade. Now, I found a portrait here which is licensed with Creative Commons. It's not one of my images. I've just done some basic editing, so I have color balance Filmic. The skin is slightly red, so I have two choices. Either I use Sigmoid and I reduce the preserve hue slightly, a little bit or too much. That's up to you after to decide exactly what you're doing, but it is one way. If you want to give the impression of sunlight, you can kind of use this trick. If I want to keep Filmic, or if I don't want to touch that, and I don't want to affect too many other colors in the image, let's go to Filmic, where I don't have the choice anyway. I can go to the color equalizer here. Let's switch that on. In the Hue tab, select some skin color. Let's say up here on the forehead. Align the node placement, and I can make just a hue shift, just obviously not too much, just a slight hue shift on the reds, give the skin a yellower tone, which might give the impression of kind of a sunnier disposition, while leaving all the other colours intact, especially these reds you saw in the hair that were shifting quite badly when I removed the hue preservation. So that is one application maybe for portraits. Now, if we are talking about landscapes, now I found one image here which is taken in the sun. Mountain scene, same thing, it's not by me. It has a Creative Commons license. I've done a little bit of processing to it. Let's, what should we do? Sigmoid on, for example. And the preserve hue is at 0. And if I put preserve hue to 100, we get a slight shift here is actually turning greener. Now, the idea for me, as this is taken in the sun, is to make sure that these greens appear quite yellow. So the same thing will apply here on the color equalizer, is I can choose a hue in these greens, maybe take one of the real greens here, and I can shift the node, and we can shift it slightly towards the yellows underneath here. So I can, you see, if I do that, then it appears more sunny, kind of more summery. And if I go towards the greens and then I darken it, then I will give the impression of shade. So that can be used here. I'm kind of, it's a global shift, but it is something you can use on your photos of landscapes, shifting towards the yellows for the sun, the greens and the shade, and even from green you can actually shift a little bit further into the blues for dark shade, and that will help you to give depth, some depth to your photos. Anyway, so that is also the Bezold-Brucke effect. So now I think it'll be up to you to experiment with all that, and I will see you later in another video.